Trojan fans, who is going to
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
fight on, everyone? I'm your host, Mark Holkin. Thank you for making the Locked On USC, part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you're downloading your podcast, the show is free. I always appreciate your support. So that tease, who's going to, there are so many, well, there's a few different directions I can take that fill in the blank question. I'm going to go down a couple of different rabbit holes this episode of Locked On USC. Fair or not, no pun intended. Which one of USC's incoming transfer portal players out of the spring window is going to make the biggest impact? Wide receiver Jay Fair from Auburn. He's good. He's fast. He can give Zachariah Branch a breather. He's not playing in front of him. He's a redshirt junior. Got a couple of years of eligibility left still. Wide receiver Kyle Ford. He's back. He said, my bad. I'm back. Impact? No. What about the defensive back from Florida State, Greedy Vance? He can play nickel. He can play cornerback. Pretty good player. But again, he wasn't in spring camp. USC's secondary, it's deep. Remember the guys who came over in December and January? So who did I miss? Who else came through the spring window? So that's my point. So far, the biggest impact this spring that happened in the transfer portal, it was Isaiah Rakes leaving USC after his uniform just started to fit right. Lincoln Riley added some depth pieces in the spring window, but he didn't really add anybody that anyone anticipates is going to make a significant impact. And look, I know it. I'm beating a dead horse into a bloody pulp. But look, another two defensive line guys who USC offered, they were interested in. I think they found him at the right price. Two more guys. They chose door number 2. The latest, the most recent defensive line player, this is more of an edge guy who said, thank you, USC, for your interest, but I'm taking my talents elsewhere, is former Tennessee, former Louisville rush edge. His name is Tyler Barron. He is now going to Miami. I don't know, maybe he likes that part of the country better than the West Coast. Played at Tennessee. He was committed to Louisville. Now we're going to Miami. Stay in that same area. Benefit of the doubt, right? Whatever. I let my everydayers know last week that Brandon Lane, the defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman from Stephen F. Austin, he was already leaning away from USC. Well, he confirmed he's now going to Louisville, of all places. I think it's clear. The overwhelming circumstantial evidence makes it plain as day. USC ain't paying the NIL asking price. How else do you explain literally swinging and missing? They're wearing the golden sombrero right now. If you're not familiar with the golden sombrero, you're obviously not a baseball fan. You strike out 4 times in a game, you wear the sombrero. I don't know how they came upon that one, but I used to hear Vince Scully talk about it all the time. Not very many guys struck out 4 times in a game. USC has struck out 4 times in the spring transfer portal window with defensive line guys. At least 4 times. I'm not going to give them the platinum sombrero yet. They still have the young man from Wyoming. What's his name? Gavin Myers. He's still available. I think at this point, let's just kind of take in the, we're doing the 5 stages of grief. We should be at the acceptance point right now. It just doesn't feel like USC is going to find what they need in the transfer portal this spring. So, who is going to make the biggest impact from USC's transfer portal arrivals? Combination early December portal and the spring. Already talked about Jay Fair, Kyle Ford. They're going to make some contributions during the season. But they're not going to be, look, unless Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson and Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon and Kyron Hudson, unless those guys completely regress, no wide receivers coming in and playing ahead of those guys. I mentioned the redshirt junior, Greedy Vance. He came in after spring camp, so he's going to have an uphill battle. But he's got, that Power 4 experience playing at Florida State. So if we include the December transfers, now we start getting into the guys who need to make the impact. You got quarterback Jaden Mayaba, who's got a great chance to make an impact. He's literally the next man up after Miller Moss. You have wide receiver Jaden Richardson. He was here for the spring. He showed good hands during the spring game, picked that ball up right before it hit the ground. But again, he's in a similar spot as Kyle Ford and Jay Fair. Even though he was here in the spring, USC's got a really good group of wide receivers. 5 guys who've been around. So in December, it's this next group of 8 who are also at USC for spring. These are the guys that I think everybody anticipates is going to be making the biggest impact. This group, these 8 guys: Easton Mascarenas Arnold, Achille Arnold, half brother, John Humphrey, DeCarlos Nicholson, Nate Clifton, Kamari Ramsey, Hank Pepper, and Joquavius Marks. I'm going to go out on a limb. May 21st. Each one of those 8 guys that I just named, they're going to be starting on September 1st in Las Vegas against LSU. Easton will be your starting middle linebacker. Kamari and Achille will be the starting safety combination. Nate Clifton will be lined up inside right next door to Bear Alexander. And you got Woody Marks. He'll be lining up behind Miller Moss at running back. He has that experience. He's played against LSU from the SEC. I don't think the moment will be too big for him. Just because you start, again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the most touches. You got Hank Pepper. I think he has the easiest, hardest job on the team. He's a long snapper, kind of like being the biggest little city in the country, Reno. So that leaves 2 more guys. You've got the cornerbacks, John Humphrey from UCLA, DeCarlos Nicholson from Mississippi State. If those guys aren't starting at cornerback, maybe at nickel, but then again, you've got Jalen Smith. You still have Jacoby Covington. You've got Prophet Brown. Jacoby, Prophet, they look great in the bowl game. They look great in the spring. Certainly, those guys can screw up my parlay card that I've got going here right now. Isn't it weird, though, that it's the early December window that turned out to be the guys who are going to save the world for USC, not the spring? That's the one where everyone was anticipating getting some defensive tackles. Everybody's going to come. They're going to play for Eric Henderson. They're going to be, Coach Riley said, for every one guy that leaves USC, there's going to be 100 guys lining up. And here we are. So right now, look, the coaching staff, they've got their heads wrapped around recruiting as well as they should. You got official visitor weekends coming up real soon, NMA all throughout June. I'll tell you what, I would love to get an update from Coach Riley right now, if possible. His thoughts, his feelings. What's he going to do? He's still got, by the way, there are still, by my calculations, there are 5 open scholarship spots right now on the roster. Where are you going to get those filled from? The transfer portal? You're going to give them to guys who are already on the roster? I think at least 2, maybe 3. I think you're going to save a couple of them. But right now, get some spots. Nobody wants them. At least where USC needs them. Talk about the defense again. Where are those offensive tackles? Those depth pieces. There weren't really any available in the spring window, so I'm not going to hold that against the coaching staff. But interior defensive line, I'm not holding it against the coaching staff, but again, USC did not perform as well as they could have. How's that? Without throwing anybody under the bus. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And with eBay Motors, they have everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Turning down the volume? Everyone's yelling, shouting, getting on your nerves. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, and it's streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am starting to believe that on 3 networks, Jesse Simonton, he doesn't like Lincoln Riley. Flat out, just does not like him. You've heard me mention that gentleman's name before. National writer for the On 3 network. Has some strong opinions, like I do. And he's been throwing some shade at USC this offseason. Seems like every opportunity he gets, it's like, woo, let's see what we can do to USC this time. I mean, let me remind my everydayers and some of my new listeners, new watchers, part of the Locked On USC, part of the Locked On Network. This gentleman did not have USC listed in with a top 10 wide receiver group in the country. He had Colorado over USC. We talked about this on a previous episode. Go check that out. Well, here's another. I mean, the fact that he did not have USC's wide receiver group in the top 10 in the country, I don't know. Is it criminal? Is it comical? Is it both? It was a terrible list. But here's another. Look, and I get it. It's the doldrums. I know clicks are important. But his post-spring power index has USC as the number 7 team in the 18-team Big Conference. I'm done calling it the Big Ten. It is the Big Conference with 18 teams. He has USC number 7 behind Nebraska and behind Iowa, respectively. This is what the SEC USC hater said about USC, why he has them at number 7. Lincoln Riley got off to a hot start in the 2024 offseason. But the spring ended without the much-needed sizzle along the offensive and defensive lines. I've talked about that. The Trojans mostly failed to address key roles in the trenches, which stands to be problematic in year one in the he called the Big Ten. Miller Moss wasn't overly impressive in the spring game either, but USC does at least have options with UNLV transfer Jaden Mayava. The improvements on the defensive staff showed immediate signs this spring, but barring some late movement, the overall roster still isn't where it needs to be for the Trojans to compete for a conference title this fall. Okay. I think it's clear he's not a Riley man, because wait till you hear why he has Nebraska as his fifth best team. Behind, here, by the way, 1 through 4, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State. And then here comes Nebraska. Is the Cornhusker hype too much again this offseason? I don't think so. Matt Rule was able to keep his defensive staff together while upgrading the offensive assistants. Freshman quarterback Dylan Raiola looked the part of a 5-star recruit during the spring. And portal upgrades at receiver, tailback, and linebacker looked like hits. It's tough to bank on a freshman at quarterback, but Raiola raises Nebraska's ceiling, which gives the Cornhuskers the slight edge over a group of teams that all can make cases for rounding up the top 5 entering the summer. Obviously, USC is part of this group. So here's his rationale. Because Dylan Raiola, freshman quarterback, looked the part in a controlled spring game, he would rather take that result over Miller Moss's result in the Holiday Bowl, as well as his cadre of wide receivers. So he's got actual game experience. And he's heading into his third year with Lincoln Riley as his head coach / quarterback coach. I like Coach Matt Rule. I really do. Before Coach Riley got the call, he was at the top of my wish list. Cheese and rice, Jesse. Make it make sense. And here's number 6, Iowa. The Hawkeyes made one of the sneakier moves of the spring portal window, bringing in Northwestern transfer quarterback Brendan Sullivan. Although Cade McNamara is back in 2024, the Michigan transfer did not look healthy in the spring, and Sullivan might represent an upgrade anyways. Bill Parker's defense stands to be fantastic once again, especially at linebacker, corner, and safety. So if the new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester, can at least awaken Iowa's moribund offense, then Kirk Ferentz could find his way to another 10-win season. 9 to 10-win season. Do you notice his throwaway anyways comment and hoping the offensive coordinator can make lemonade out of the lemons that Kirk Ferentz has been recruiting on offense? Look, I think Jesse Simonson is making it very clear. He anticipates a lot of low-scoring games in the big conference because that's what happens, right? I don't know. Guess why he has Oregon number 2? I'm just going to throw this in there for shoots and giggles. In advance of the program's move to the Big Ten, the Ducks had an excellent offseason. Dan Lanning inked another top 10 recruiting class and signed a bevy of impact transfers, including quarterback Dylan Gabriel, wideout Evan Stewart, corner Jabbar Muhammad. Oregon grabbed one of the top defensive tackles on a thin market in this spring, Michigan State's Derek Harmon, and plucked former fringe 5-star safety Peyton Woodyard away from Alabama. So let's review the great transfer portal window, or all the transfers that Dan Lanning brought in. So you got Dylan Gabriel, who was the starter at Oklahoma last year, who wasn't going to be this guy this year. He was going to be unseated by a younger player. But because Oregon recruits great quarterbacks. They've got them waiting in the pipeline. There's another year where they're bringing somebody in to be the starter. Last year was Bo Nix. Talked about the wide receiver, Evan Stewart. Okay. He hasn't done anything yet in college. I mean, he's secured another bag. Remember, he got one from Texas A&M. USC rolled their eyes when Evan Stewart's reps asked if there was any interest in him. Literally, USC was like, "Yeah, please go away. Yeah, we're not giving him $1 million plus." That was his asking price. Oregon paid it. Yes, they wanted Harmon, but they did not want it at the $1.5 million. Oh, and by the way, it was more than that. USC needed a defensive tackle, but they were not going to overpay. LSU wasn't going to pay that money either. They settled on JVR Suggs, another player that USC swung and miss on. And he brought up Peyton Woodyard, who is, by the way, he's now committed to his third college team. Good luck to Peyton. I like the young man. Very nice young man. I've met him. I've eaten with him. But it seems like he's chasing something. And look, I'm just going to keep it real. He's not going to play this year or have an impact this year for Oregon. If he is, then he was probably good enough to play for Georgia, where he first committed. He went through spring camp at Alabama. He was running with the second team. I don't know. Look, I'm not saying that USC should be number 1, 2, or 3 in the power index coming out of spring camp. But number 7? Come on, man. Give me a break. What I will say is, you know what? You're giving me some content, Jesse. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's hang around. Let's stay with the big conference. And I know this might sound like I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but not really. I think we can separate different issues here. So, top 5 head coaches in the big conference. This is one of the topics we talked about on this week's Inside the Trojan Huddle over there on rearview.com. Go check it out when you're done making Locked on USC your first listen every day. So we still have that subscription special, so take advantage of it. So here is my top 5 head coaches in the big conference, 1 through 5. Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, Kirk Ferentz, number 3, Matt Rule, number 4, James Franklin, number 5. So the reason why I have Ryan Day at number 1, he's been able to maintain that consistency. And now that Jim Harbaugh is gone, he might be able to take back the that rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan. Always recruits well. Always in contention for the conference championship, as well as in the playoff picture. They will be again this year. They're loaded. They should be the number 1 team. And he should be the number 1 head coach in the big conference. Why do I have Lincoln Riley at number 2 over Kirk Ferentz? He hasn't won a conference championship at USC. He's been in the playoffs a few times. Hasn't been successful. But he also has some other accolades. He's got a few Heismans. He knows how to coach offense. He's young. He's headed in the right direction. Lincoln Riley is trending up. And despite, that big-time hiccup last year, I think even though he's not as hot of a commodity until he can show that, yeah, you know what? I'm going to show you my defense this year. Until that happens, his stock has dropped a little bit. But as far as the big conference, I would want him right behind Ryan Day. Kirk Ferentz, again, number 3, because of his longevity. He's been doing it for a while. He's consistent. You always know what you're going to get with Iowa. You're going to get slow, plodding, methodical on offense, and you're going to get strong, reliable, snot-nosed, hit in the face defense. Number 4, Matt Rule. Again, he was top of my wish list before Lincoln Riley got the call, took the job. Yeah, I wanted that guy again because I wanted to try and go in a more defensive type of direction. Somebody who isn't more, isn't as aggressive on offense. And James Franklin, why do I have him at number 5? You got to give the guy some credit. I mean, he did win at Vanderbilt. Really tough to do. He's won at Penn State. He hasn't been able to really get over the hump. Here's the thing with Coach Franklin, and I know a lot of people said, hey, USC should hire him. No. Remember, he finds way to help his team lose games. I don't know if a Nittany Lion's considered a Cougar, but yeah, I think Penn State is the new Wazoo as far as USC is concerned. Remember the Rose Bowl? He had a big hand in USC's comeback. Big hand. So after those guys, the other runners-up, honorable mention. I like Jed Fish. I mean, what he did at Arizona, very commendable. He's going to need at least another year to get that going at Washington. Greg Schiano, Rutgers, was doing Greg Schiano thing. Got them playing solid defense. They'll upset somebody this year. Better not be USC. Who else did I have? And then I want to say Sharon Moore. He really impressed me with what he was able to do last year on an interim basis. But he gets to do it for real now. 12-game regular season. And he gets to do it without 13 guys that are in the NFL. I know he's returning some dudes who were on that team last year. He kept the guys he needed to, specifically Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, cornerback. But he actually got a couple guys to transfer into. I just think they're taking a step back. And so I think it's just too early to put him in the top 5 right now. Now, if he repeats what he did last year, boom. Yeah, he's moving on up like the Jeffersons, right up to the top. Dan Lanning, look, he gets credit for his cigar. He gets credit for recruiting. But in my opinion, he's another Mario Cristobal when it comes to X's and O's. So there it is. That's my top 5 and honorable mention. You agree, disagree? Hit me up. Tell me what you think in the comment section. I'm going to be back with another episode of Locked on USC tomorrow. Trying to get some recruiting news for you. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.